New Calvinism for Dummies, Part 3. Okay, we're going to start off this part by talking about one of the major tenets of New Calvinism, this whole idea of the golden chain of salvation, used differently by saints of old. We'll look here at how the New Calvinists use the term, and several of the major figures in New Calvinism are difficult to tie directly back to the forum, but this is one of the tenets that enables us to do that. The citation to from where I took these John Piper quotes is there on the bottom, underneath the gold chain. Basically, the idea is again, their interpretations of Romans 8:30. And by the way, if you want to know the difference between a new Calvinist and a real Calvinist, the difference is how they interpret Romans 8:30. A real Calvinist will say that sanctification is not included in Romans 8:30 because sanctification and justification are separate, and glorification is guaranteed when you're justified. And but a new Calvinist would say Paul didn't talk about sanctification in that verse because justification and sanctification are one of the same. And because of what they believe of this whole concept of the golden chain of salvation, that's irrefutable that they think that they're fused. Here, John Piper, I've got two quotes here, talks about two kinds of synergism in this chain. And he says one image and he's talking about how we see the chain of salvation, and he says our image is of Christ walking along. This is one of the images he doesn't want you to see. A Christian walking along the edge of a great chasm, which he needs to cross to get to heaven. Again, notice the clear indication there that they believe that sanctification completes justification, and that sanctification is the link that ties glorification and justification together. No, the two were linked together before the foundation of the world. He is hypothetically holding on to one end of the chain, leading into the past. Day by day, he is forging the links of faithfulness as best he can, doing his best, in other words, with some help from the Holy Spirit. So, this is a dissing of co-laboring with the Holy Spirit or being helped by the Holy Spirit. Well, why does he see a problem with that? Because they see the whole process as justification or a salvation process. Orthodox Christians don't see it that way. They don't see it as the Holy Spirit helping us to complete salvation. They see it as the Holy Spirit helping us in sanctification or regeneration, and it doesn't matter if the Holy Spirit helps us because our justification is a finished work and already determined. Glorification's guaranteed. And then he mentions another type of synergism here where we're not able to do our best, but the Holy Spirit is kind of a safety belt, and no matter how bad we fail in faithfully building our own links to heaven, this is the terminology that he's using, building our own links to heaven, the Holy Spirit's kind of like a safety net or a safety harness. Clearly, my friends, this shows how John Piper perceives a sanctification as part of a chain that links salvation to glorification. This is plain. So, the way he wants to see it, you to see it, is this last one, which is salvation by faith alone and sanctification. Justification and sanctification are fused like a chain. They call it the golden chain of salvation. That's what they call it. He says, there is a danger on the way to salvation in heaven. We need ongoing protection after our conversion. No, we don't. There's absolutely no danger in us reaching heaven if we're saved. It's guaranteed. Where's the danger? There's danger in not pleasing the Lord. I suppose life's dangerous. Christians are oftentimes in dangerous situations, but if we're saved, our ultimate salvation is guaranteed. He says our security does not mean we are home free. Okay? There is a battle to be fought. There is, but not for justification. And you notice he doesn't clarify that. And this is classic John Piper doublespeak, nuance, whatever you want to call it. There's a battle to be fought. Well, in what regard, Dr. Piper? In regard to fighting for our salvation? Well, in fact, in the book, When We Don't Desire God, I believe the title is. In fact, that's his thesis, that we have to fight for our joy. Okay? But the only problem is, also in the book, he makes joy synonymous with salvation. So in the book where he plainly says that we're fighting for our joy, he's also saying we're fighting for our salvation. All right? So, at any rate, he says, and this battle we need protection with and help far beyond what we can supply for ourselves. This means the means God uses to protect us is faith. Now, this is key. All right, we have quotations from other new Calvinists on this point. This is key. Note again, this means God uses the means. Okay, the means God uses to protect us is faith. All right, Ernest Reisinger says that we're kept by God through faith. All right, we are now being protected by the power of God through faith. Stop the presses. Stop the presses. Our faith then in sanctification taps God's power. And you say, well, Paul, isn't that true? Yeah, it's true for sanctification, but he's saying it's true for justification. Friends, do you see where we have a rather huge problem here with this theology? But at any rate, there's that visual there, and we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, just a quick visual here of this whole business of joining justification and sanctification together. And when you do that, this chart kind of puts forth the idea that one's got to affect the other. And this is, of course, this motif matches their mantras and their little jingles. One there at the top. Therefore, New Calvinists say the same gospel that saves you also sanctifies you, and we must preach the gospel to ourselves every day. And sanctification is justification in action. All of these things you hear him say pertains again to this whole idea of joining the two of them together. And I might add, before we go on to the next frame, that because the two are joined, this makes sanctification very tricky business, because what you either do or don't do points back to your justification, right? So that's why this is a critical issue. Now, this is going to be our last slide for part 3. Actually, this is a slide I made some time ago, and the premise of it is an error, because what I thought is when you combine justification and sanctification, make sanctification what completes justification, you can only come up with two different things. You have two choices: works or antinomianism. All right, and for a long time in studying this issue with New Calvinism, I always thought those of antinomianism and Christ plus works, or Christ plus ritual, or Christ, plus something after we're justified to finish our salvation was works, and then the opposite of that is the same problem with the two being connected. And hey, you look there at the note up at the right-hand side where it says Christ keeping the law for us in sanctification, because it is the progression of justification. So yeah, Christ has to keep the law for us, because sanctification is completing justification. We can't complete it ourselves. The standard for being justified is perfection. So they would rightly say then, absolutely, Christ has to keep the law for us in a case like that. But here is the thing. When justification and sanctification are combined together, either not doing something or doing something, both is participating in justification. So basically it's all work salvation. You are doing something to keep your salvation. And that's a huge problem. Alright, we don't want people to not believe they can lose their salvation so that they'll feel better. We want people to believe they can't lose their salvation, because the question then becomes, what do you have to do to keep it? Alright? So, both are work salvation. Salvation, or, salvation plus not doing anything for salvation. Salvation plus works for salvation. Either way, we're participants in completing justification, and that's a huge problem. Now, we're going to end part 3 with this slide, and we are going to move on to part 4 to look at this issue deeper.